The desert feels endless. Heat rises from the sand in slow, distorted waves, bending the horizon until everything in the distance looks unstable. Inside the tank, the world is completely different. The space is tight, enclosed by thick steel that was designed to protect, but also isolates. Every surface is hard, every sound echoes. The hum of the engine travels through the metal and into the body, making it impossible to ignore where you are. There is no room to stretch, no room to move freely. Every crew member sits close to the others, surrounded by equipment, shells, and fuel. The tank feels powerful from the outside, but inside, it feels fragile. Not because the armor is weak, but because everything important is packed into a small, confined space. Looking through the scope changes perspective completely. The outside world becomes distant, almost unreal. Shapes move across the desert. A column of T-72 tanks advances slowly, their silhouettes shimmering in the heat. They appear solid, like nothing could stop them. That's the illusion every tank creates. But that illusion depends on distance. Up close, every tank shares the same vulnerability. The armor is only part of the story. What matters is what's inside. Ammunition, fuel, heat, pressure, all contained within a sealed structure. The design prioritizes efficiency and firepower, but that efficiency creates risk. The command to fire interrupts everything. There is no hesitation. The shot leaves the barrel with controlled violence, shaking the entire vehicle. For a moment, everything returns to silence. Then the round connects. Impact doesn't always look dramatic at first. Sometimes it's just a spark, a small burst, but inside the target, the situation is already changing. Penetration allows heat and fragments to enter the compartment. And inside that space, everything reacts at once. Ammunition is the most dangerous element. It doesn't need much to ignite. Once it does, the reaction spreads rapidly. Each shell becomes a source of energy, feeding the next. This is what turns damage into destruction. Inside the struck tank, time compresses. A crew member reacts instinctively, reaching for the hatch. The action is simple: open, escape. But heat changes the structure faster than expected. Metal expands, mechanisms lock. The same hatch that provided access moments ago becomes immovable. This is where design reveals its weakness. Enclosed systems are efficient under normal conditions. But when something goes wrong, they limit options. There are no alternate exits. No secondary paths. Everything depends on the primary mechanism working. From the outside, the tank is just releasing smoke. From the inside, the environment is collapsing. Oxygen is replaced by heat and fumes. Visibility disappears. Orientation is lost. The space that once felt controlled now feels impossible to navigate. Then the internal reaction reaches its peak. Ammunition ignites fully. Pressure builds faster than the structure can contain. The turret, one of the heaviest parts of the tank, is forced upward in a violent release of energy. The entire system fails at once. What remains is not a vehicle, but the result of a chain reaction that could not be stopped once it began. Out at sea, the scale changes, but the principles remain the same. The USS Iowa BB-61 moves with stability and purpose. It represents engineering at its peak: layered defenses, massive firepower, and structured systems designed to operate under extreme conditions. Inside one of its turrets, however, the environment becomes similar to the tank. Enclosed, pressurized, controlled. The space is carefully designed to handle large shells and explosive charges, but it is still limited in size and flexibility. Crew members operate within strict procedures. Every movement is calculated. Shells are positioned precisely. Powder bags are handled with care. Timing is everything. The system depends on synchronization, where each step leads directly into the next. This kind of system works perfectly, until something interrupts the sequence. When an ignition occurs inside an enclosed turret, the effects multiply instantly. Fire does not spread gradually. It expands in all directions at once, filling the available space. Heat builds rapidly because there is nowhere for it to escape. Pressure follows. The structure contains the force, but only temporarily. Inside, movement becomes restricted. Visibility is lost. Communication breaks down. The environment changes faster than human reaction time. Outside the turret, the situation looks contained. Steel walls remain intact, but inside, the system has already failed. The design that protects against external threats now traps internal danger. Attempts to access the space are slowed by the same factors that cause the problem. Heat affects the outer surfaces. Mechanisms fail under pressure. Entry points become unusable. The system becomes isolated at the worst possible moment. Time becomes the critical factor. But time is also limited. Without immediate access, the internal environment cannot stabilize. The event resolves itself through consumption. Fuel, oxygen, and energy are used up until nothing remains active. On the flight deck of the USS Forrestal CV-59, the environment is open, but the risk is just as concentrated. Aircraft are positioned close together for operational efficiency. Fuel lines, weapons, and personnel all exist in a shared space. This creates a network of potential reactions. Each aircraft is not just a machine, but a collection of volatile materials. Fuel, explosives, and mechanical systems all interacting within a limited area. When a malfunction occurs, the effect spreads through this network. A rocket misfires. It travels across the deck and strikes another aircraft. The initial impact is only the beginning. Fuel ignites, creating a fire that immediately looks for more fuel. Because everything is positioned closely, the fire finds it quickly. This is how chain reactions begin. One failure leads to another, and then another. Each step increases the intensity. Explosions follow as heat reaches stored munitions. These secondary blasts are often more destructive than the first event. Response teams operate under extreme conditions. Heat distorts visibility. Smoke reduces awareness. Explosions disrupt coordination. Even trained crews are forced to react to changing conditions rather than control them. The environment itself becomes unstable. Open space does not guarantee safety when the entire surface is active. Fire spreads horizontally, vertically, unpredictably. Control is lost not because of lack of effort, but because of the scale of interaction. Deep underwater, the Kursk submarine represents another form of controlled isolation. It is built to survive immense external pressure, to operate independently for long periods, and to maintain internal stability. But this stability depends entirely on internal systems functioning correctly. When an internal explosion occurs, the balance is disrupted instantly. The first blast damages structure and systems. The second amplifies that damage, removing entire sections from operation. What remains is divided into compartments, each isolated from the others. This compartmentalization is designed to save lives. It prevents flooding from spreading. But it also creates separation. Survivors may be safe from water, but cut off from escape. Inside a surviving compartment, the situation becomes a problem of resources. Oxygen is limited, temperature drops, light disappears, communication with the outside is uncertain or impossible. Every action is calculated, movement is minimized, resources are conserved, but these measures only slow the outcome. They do not change it. The environment is stable for a short time, but it cannot remain that way indefinitely. Oxygen decreases, carbon dioxide increases. Even small systems used to generate oxygen can introduce new risks. Time defines everything. Rescue efforts exist, but they are affected by distance, conditions, and decisions. Inside, the situation continues to deteriorate regardless of external progress. In training environments, control is expected to eliminate risk. Procedures are designed to simulate real conditions without full danger. But simulations rely on predictability, and not all variables can be controlled. When an unexpected reaction occurs, the system behaves according to its true nature, not the intended scenario. Fire spreads as designed. Chemical reactions continue as programmed. The difference is that the environment is not prepared for deviation. Response teams act quickly, but some processes cannot be reversed once they begin. The situation becomes a demonstration of how real-world conditions override controlled expectations. A bunker represents physical protection. Thick materials absorb impact. The structure creates a barrier between external threats and internal safety. But this protection depends on structural balance. Explosions create force not just outward, but through the ground. Vibrations travel into the structure, affecting support points. When these supports weaken, the distribution of weight changes. Collapse is not gradual. It happens suddenly, when the structure can no longer hold itself together. The same materials that provided safety become the source of danger. Weight shifts downward, creating pressure that is difficult to relieve. Rescue operations must deal with this weight carefully. Removing debris too quickly can cause further collapse. Moving too slowly reduces survival chances. Every decision involves risk. At sea, the S-178 submarine experiences a different type of failure. A collision introduces immediate structural damage. Water enters with force, driven by pressure differences. The submarine begins to sink. Internal compartments determine how long it remains survivable. Some areas flood instantly, others remain intact temporarily. Survivors depend on these intact spaces. Air becomes the most valuable resource. Without circulation, it degrades quickly. Carbon dioxide rises, oxygen falls. Even if water is kept out, the environment becomes uninhabitable over time. Rescue depends on external access. But underwater conditions complicate this. Visibility, pressure, and time all limit effectiveness. The system holds only as long as internal conditions allow. During training with explosives, timing is everything. A grenade operates on a fixed sequence. Once activated, it cannot be stopped. The delay is short, designed for tactical use, not recovery. If the sequence is interrupted, the outcome depends entirely on immediate action. There is no margin for hesitation. Decisions made in seconds determine survival. In rare cases, intervention changes the outcome. Physical shielding can redirect the force of the explosion. But this requires instant recognition and action, with no time for reconsideration. Across all these situations, the same pattern appears. Systems are designed for protection, efficiency, and control. But those designs operate within limits. When conditions exceed those limits, the system does not adapt, it fails. Enclosed environments increase efficiency but reduce escape options. Concentrated materials improve performance but increase risk. Structural strength resists external threats but can amplify internal ones. Failure does not happen slowly. It happens when multiple factors align: heat, pressure, timing, and environment. Once that threshold is crossed, outcomes change rapidly. What remains consistent is the role of time. Seconds determine whether a system holds or collapses, whether a response is effective or too late. And in those seconds, the difference between survival and loss is often decided before anyone fully understands what is happening.